So in the video that you just got a chance to watch, obviously you guys at home cannot watch it, but we watched a video about DJ Kool Herc, who most people consider the godfather of hip-hop. Now, why do they consider him the godfather of hip-hop? Well, Kool Herc, back in the early 70s, yes, hip-hop goes back to the early 70s, that's when it started. DJ Kool Herc was a DJ from Jamaica. And what he did is he took the Jamaican style of DJing and he took it to South Bronx. And what he learned to do was basically he took the instrumental breakdown part of the old funk and rock songs and he began to string them together, because he noticed that when he was playing his records for the crowds, he was a DJ that threw parties, he noticed that when that break beat, that breakdown part of it, when that would come on, that's when the crowd would really get down. And so what he began to do is he realized that what if he just took that part here on this record, and on this record, and on this record, and this record, and began to extend them or string them all along. He realized that, hey, he can rock the party that much more. And thus, whether we realized it or not, or he realized it, that's when hip-hop began. Because what happened there? He began to understand that what people move to, more than anything, is drums. Drums, percussion, the beat. The basis of all hip-hop music is the beat. It's drum-based. Rock music is guitar-based. Okay? Drums are an afterthought. Hip-hop is the opposite. Hip-hop is drum-based, and the music and the melody is an afterthought, if that makes sense. So this goes all the way back to DJ Kool Herc, stringing along the break beats, the breakdown parts, the parts that were just usually just boom, ga, boom, ga, boom, ga, that little part. And that's when the B-boys, and they were called B-boys because they were the break boys, or the Bronx boys, they called them B-boys. That's when they would begin to do the upright. I can't break dance. I'm not going to try to break dance. But that's when they would basically get down. And that was sometimes when the MC would step. Now, they called him the MC because the MC would MC the party. And so really the focus was the DJ. But the MC would get up there at that point when that beat broke down, and he would start to put little rhymes together. He would make the crowd, he would do a call, and then the crowd would respond. Stuff like, you know, hip, hop, hippie to the hip, 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 the hop. You know, the little rhymes begin to string together, and, you know, throw your hands up in the air, wave them all around like you just don't care. All those things were little rhymes that people would put together, and they would wait for that breakdown part. I'm telling you this history is so you understand when you're making hip-hop music, it starts with the drums. Okay? The melody's cool. The melody is a part of it. It's very important. But it starts with the drums. So what we're going to talk about today when we talk about producing, we're going to talk about the drum, the percussion, all the things that go into this. If you really want to get technical, you could really even trace this back to Africa. In Africa, people communicate through the drum. The drum is more than just a time-keeping device. It is a way of communication. So, again, this all comes back to culture. Sometimes we forget about culture and we try to divorce it. But culture, I'll get even more specific, black culture and percussion go hand in hand. It's very rhythm-based. Rhythm-based. Okay? That's what we need to understand. It's all rhythm-based. It's all rhythmic-based. When you rhyme, you're rhyming in a pattern, you're rhyming in a timing. It's all rhythm-based. Okay? So with that being said, drums are the basis of hip-hop. In fact, as hip-hop begins to grow over the years, now obviously we're talking back in the early 70s, as hip-hop now in 2007, as it begins to grow, people take and pull and begin to add their own flavor to it. I'll give you a good example, a couple things to understand. The pattern, the drum pattern that you put your drums in, the way you program your drums, or the way you play your drums, will determine what region you're from. Okay? And I'll explain why that is in just a minute, but understanding the patterns that you put your drums in, or even the sounds that you use to make your drums, without going too deep, let me just make a good example. Let me play you this track right here. This is a down south drum track. We'll play it right here. Take a listen. Okay. Now, if you listen to that drum track, that drum pattern, what is it? It's a little slower. It's a little more bass heavy. Okay. The snare that you hear in there is usually a clap. Okay. A lot of this comes from the old school drum machine called the TR-808. Okay. The TR-808 was an early drum machine that people used, and that's where a lot of the southern music gets their sound. We'll flip it. Let's go to the East Coast. Okay. Let's play this track right here. Take a listen. that, what happens there? The tempo that there is a little faster, but the sounds that are drums that are used in that drums, in those percussion, are a little less bass heavy, and they're a little more live sounding. Okay, so the drums that are sampled in there are usually sampled. Okay, they're not necessarily taken from a drum machine. Okay, so that's more East Coast. Okay, so now we're going to go out to the West. Take a listen to this right here. Okay, now when you listen to West Coast drums, they tend to be sort of almost a amalgamation between the two. In fact, a lot of the West Coast drum influence, it comes from old funk music like Parliament, Funkadelic, those type of stuff. That's where you hear that big clap. Okay, a lot of the old school hip hop, West Coast hip hop comes from that sound because that was the sound that's very dominant on that region. So there you go. Now we talked about the different regional sounds, and if you notice, there was even 3 big tempo changes. We could even take it one step further and talk about club music. Club music, hip-hop club music tends to be even a little faster. Dirty South music, down South music, tends to be a little bit, somewhere the BPM range is like around 75 to usually around 90. East Coast hip-hop tends to be around 90 to maybe even up to 105. West Coast tends to be somewhat in 85 to 95 BPMs. Now, why is all this? Why is there different tempos? Why is there different sounds? Why do certain drum patterns determine a certain region? Meaning you throw those drums in or you throw that sound in. Whether you realize it or not, you've now determined where it is. Why is that? I'm going to tell you exactly why. First off, to understand why people use certain drums, you have to understand how people listen to music. Okay? Good example. Down south, people do not ride public transportation as much. Very little. In fact, most people, when they play their music down south, they play it in their car. They play it in their car with a big sound system. So if you put East Coast drums into a sound system, a nice bumping sound system down south, what happens? Doesn't bump. Doesn't hit. It's not bass heavy enough. And vice versa. Now up in the East Coast, in New York City, vice versa, you know, the Northeast, what we would consider the Northeast, up there, where do most people listen to music? They listen to them in headphones because most people don't drive cars as much in the city. You take public transportation. So if you put on a pair of headphones and you rock low-end bass, like down south bass, and you put it in some headphones, you're not going to be able to hear the frequencies as well. And so now what happens? You can't respond to the music the same way as if you put in East Coast drums. Because why? East Coast drums don't have that bottom. They pick up better in the headphones. You can hear the snap and the snare much better. And this is why a lot of people don't realize why there is a big disparity between the East and the South for so long. Why? Most of it just had to do with the way we listen to music. People in the South, they want to ride out in their car, they want to bounce in their car. Why? So they want to have that bass-heavy stuff. Up in the East Coast, they want to rock it in the headphones and bob while you're rolling in the subway. This is where these things begin to happen. Now, what about the West Coast? Well, the West Coast has a different vibe. People in the West Coast ride cars. However, it's a different vibe. It's more the lowrider car culture. So the lowrider car culture has a laid-back feel to it. Hence, a lot of the production style has that laid-back West Coast Cali riding feel. Again, we don't always realize why we like certain things, but a reason why we like certain things has to do with how we listen to things. And that's where a lot of the drums and the percussion come into play. So obviously keep this in mind. Now also when it comes to club tracks, if you're in the club, I'm not saying don't go to the club, but what I am saying is the reason why people like a certain drum sound in the club is why. Because if you're in the club, you can't dance to something that's super slow. It's got to be fast. It's got to be up-tempo. It's got to make your body move. Okay? It's got to have drum sounds that work in those areas. Again, keep all this in mind when you're making your beats. You got to start with the drums. You got to listen to your drums. You got to listen to the sounds that you're doing with your drums.